All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. We're just a bunch of Kiss fans and we talk Kiss. So come along for the ride, you've got nothing to lose. Welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm happy to introduce to you author Martin Popoff today for an interview about his new book, Kiss.76. And it is, of course, the 12 months that defined the hottest band in the land. Martin, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast.
Yes, thank you, Julian. This is very cool. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely, as is the book. So the book came out last week, I believe. And it's a book that features 1976 and Kiss. It's kind of a no-brainer to mark the 50th anniversary of 1976 and everything that happened within that year for Kiss. What made 1976 an appealing project to you to take on?
Well, I was 13 at the time, it arguably it might be the first kind of real intensity ramp up of me being a crazy music fan. Although, really, it started in 1969 at 6 years old, 70, 71, 72. I mean, I got the first Kiss album as a new release, so we were already, me and my buddies, on our way with all this hard rock and heavy metal stuff. We had a crazy rating system where everything was rated on heaviness. That's what we were looking for the entire time, right? If it wasn't heavy, we didn't like it, kind of thing. So, but I remember all sorts of great new releases from 76. Corto likes to do these sort of anniversary things. You know, I did Kiss at 50 and Van Halen at 50, Guns N' Roses at 40, Bowie at 75. Did I do AC/DC at 50? I think I did that as well. Yeah, pretty cool. And for Kiss, obviously, I mean, it's a year where, you know, they're starting the year off touring Alive, and then Destroyer comes out in March, Originals comes out in July, Rock and Roll Over comes out in November. So it's a very busy year for them, and it's just a love letter to that year, with a lot of Kiss, but the whole book isn't Kiss.
Yeah, that's part of the nice part of the concept that you've come up with for this book is that it's 1976, but it's majority Kiss focus, but you also make sure to include pop culture, current affairs, and everything else that kind of frames what makes a year in the world. How did that concept come about? What's the genesis of the idea for this book in order to frame the product as 1976, not just Kiss?
Yeah, I think I came up with it. There's obviously, as you would know, a lot of Kiss books out there. It just seemed like something that would be kind of cool to do. I would like to move into some of these little more conceptual things. And when I wrote it, actually, the way it came out isn't exactly how I wrote it. When I wrote it, I wrote per month all of those three areas to be equals. And then the layout, which is a great layout, but it kind of shocked me, not to pun, but originally, because all of the cultural and the rest of the music industry stuff is along the line in sort of a ticker tape thing, and Kiss gets kind of like 2/3 of the real estate on every page, whether it's the stuff I wrote on Kiss or big Kiss, pictures of the band. But when I wrote it, I imagined those things all to be equal. So I wanted to have even more band shots in there that were not Kiss and ads and stuff like that, because I wanted to make the point that that I suppose when I wrote it, it was more about 1976 than it is right now, which is more, much more Kiss of 76. Because, like I say, I mean, my favorite albums of 1976 are more like, at the very absolute pinnacle would be Judas Priest, Sad Wings of Destiny. We'd have Rainbow Rising in there. We'd have Rocks in there. Maybe even 2 or 3 more before I get to a Kiss album. So that's kind of the cool thing about the book. It was really about going back and remembering, my 1976.
Yeah, and when it comes to a Kiss album, you've got 2 to put up against stuff like Rocks. that's a heck of a battle to have out between Rock and Roll Over and Rocks, or what was it? High Voltage came out that year as well for AC/DC in
Yep.
that kind of realm of stuff. But the year itself, how much do you remember of 1976 as a 13-year-old? Were there some elements in that pop culture realm and the public affairs that you're like, I really want to revisit this because I remember that specifically?
Yeah, definitely. I would say more so, I suppose I remember all of the Kiss stuff, and I remember pretty much all of the music stuff. So, I could have rattled all of that off the top of my head. But the funny thing in putting this together was that I spent more time trying to figure out, when did that toy actually come out? I mean, how do you research that? Did it really come out in 75, which means it's fair game to talk about? Or did it come out in 1977, which means I can't even talk about it at all, right? Because it would just be an error. So there were a lot of weird little things like that, trying to figure out, well, the pilot of this sitcom came out here, and does the pilot count as a show because they changed the actors? So when is the first episode, and that kind of thing. So it was fun going back and remembering all the TV shows, the movies, sports. We always talked about how our favorite NFL team, for example, was the Oakland Raiders because, I can't remember how I frame it, but we used to call the Oakland Raiders Kiss on Acid, or we used to call Kiss the Oakland Raiders on Acid. But, just all that black and silver and the long hair and everything. So it all went together, kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I think as you go through the book, that was one of the funnest things, remembering all of those sitcoms and TV shows and Midnight Special and Don Kirshner's rock concert and all that. So Paul Lynde special, of course, is in here as a big deal. Circus Magazine, Cream Magazine, Hit Parader, and all the ads. I love ads. So that's all in there as well.
Yeah, it's got a plethora of imagery. I mean, I stopped dead in my tracks on one page with the Evel Knievel wind-up motorcycle, which was the last Christmas present I received in England before we moved to North America in 1978. So that stopped me dead in my tracks, as was going through and seeing some of those ads. I loved how they're sprinkled throughout, but they don't detract from the flow of the work.
Yeah.
1976. It's the year that Kiss came of age, in a sense. When you start on January the 1st, they've just had their Nassau Coliseum date, their first big show back in their home state. Mm-hmm. How does that kind of set up the story for you? Is it their definitive year, 1976?
Yeah, it's interesting. In talking through about this book, I've come to realize that a funny thing about Kiss in this year is that they start out the year touring a live. So I've always loved that idea of bands touring a live album or a greatest hits album, or a single for that matter. But so they're touring a live as the tour starts out. As the year starts out, which came out in September 75. So in essence, they're touring Alive, Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, and Dressed to Kill. Then Destroyer comes out, and now they're touring Destroyer. And then Originals comes out, and now they're touring Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, and Dressed to Kill again. And then Rock and Roll Over comes out, and there's no singles, which is kind of interesting. There's no singles for Rock and Roll Over in 1976 because they come out in 77. So it's neat to see how they're kind of promoting the entire catalog all year. Because of those two interesting happenstances, but also if you think about it, it's really their first album is 1974. So it's not even that late. 74, beginning of 74 to the end of 76 is not that much time. So it's just it's all coming down at the same time, and it's like they're rolling through this year, teaching kids about the entire history of Kiss.
And that first part of the year, by combining Alive, I mean, they start out as rock stars in 1976. Mm-hmm. Alive's been a massive success, and then they've got the pressure of following it up. And obviously, Destroyer comes out in March. We're right on the cusp of that 50th anniversary right now. And they start adding in songs, but they're still touring Alive nearly to the middle of the year. How does that skew trying to organize and present this book as a book of basically 4 albums when you include the originals reissued those early albums.
Yeah, there's a little bit in there about, and I didn't really pay much attention to this, but writing the book, I kind of learned about a little more about how much attention was paid to the costumes, and then the costumes kind of being in flux, even as Destroyer comes out, they're not quite ready, so they're still wearing alive, and all that kind of thing. But and also we have to remember that. There's still a sense of desperation in the band. I mean, even when Alive comes out, it's like they made that record because they couldn't afford to make a studio album. The label didn't think, we had enough money to do this. So everybody's rolling the dice, right? Bill Auckland's rolling the dice, and Joyce and Neil Bogart are rolling the dice, and the band is rolling the dice. They're pouring all their money back into the show, into promotion, and all those great ads we saw as kids, which didn't have much hype text to them. They're just like, it's here, it's coming. Those kinds of really cool ads with just the album cover and the black background. So they're rolling through this period, and they realize it's working, but they're by no means rich yet. They're not, they're still kind of paying back all this stuff that they had to do. But yeah, the merchandising's picking up, and the other thing to remember, and it's sort of underscored by what's happening in the rest of the music industry part of this is there's bands that are way bigger than Kiss. There's bands staking a claim that are going to be massive, like Eagles Hotel California, Fleetwood Mac. The biggest album kind of the year is Frampton Comes Alive. Rolling Stones are still a massive juggernaut, and Led Zeppelin's a juggernaut. We get Presence in '76. We get I think Black and Blue in '76. But the neat thing is that what I also sort of, got to realize through putting this book together is that, yes, Kiss is getting a lot of press. They're even getting on a lot of magazine covers, and they're playing essentially the same size venues in the same circuit now as a lot of these big bands, not the football stadium bands, but most everybody else. So even though their record sales are not stacking up against what some of these other bands are doing, we get Boston this year as well, the debut. The overall size of the business is probably as big as almost all of those other bands.
Yeah, and just to be fair, I want to add in Cheap Trick, 2112, and A Day at the Races for some of the other, kind of what a musical scene it was in 1976 to be competing against.
Yeah.
Kiss is still homebrew at the beginning of the year. They've still got their original stage show with that hasn't progressed a whole lot since 1973. They haven't got Glickman Marks yet as business managers until the middle of the year either. So it really is a transformative year. But that's all kind of back-ended by Destroyer. How important is Destroyer in 1976 to Kiss before they really start promoting it? Before Beth, what's your view on Destroyer and what Bob Ezrin was trying to do with the band?
Yeah, I remember getting that as a new release and sitting there with my headphones on, listening to it on the stereo console unit in our small town, Trail, BC, and joining the Kiss Army off of it. And I remember, and I've always thought this. I mean, I have this view with a lot of bands where there's these uniform albums, and then there's peaks and valleys albums. Or another way to put it is there's these uniform albums and albums that have a lot of dynamics, right? And Destroyer has always been one of those albums where, us as angry young metalheads at 13 years old, and this view has not changed since that day. It had the best, the coolest, the most awesome, brand new, modern, smartest heavy metal songs, and then it had the very worst Kiss songs that we could possibly ever potentially hate. Great Expectations, Beth. Really, that's about it. Hang on, is there anything else on there? That's pretty much it, right? And then there were these middle songs. Don't get me into it. We had this long, crazy rating system where we could just call up our buddies on the phone and say it's a 5 out of 7, and everybody knew what that meant. We had these tiers, but so what you got with this record was a record of some very, very quiet songs and some very, very loud and ambitious songs, and then a couple of things in the middle. Your Shout It Out Loud and your Flaming Youth and your Do You Love Me sound like Dress to Kill songs kind of thing, right? So super important. And so Bob Ezrin comes in. Bob starts out as a protege for Jack Richardson up here in Toronto, where I am, and eventually sets up shop and does wonders for Alice Cooper Group. Um, and the wonders he does for them is he makes their songs accessible, sensible, verse, chorus, sorts them out from this Zappa-esque on a Zappa label situation they had in the early days. I don't think those records sound particularly good, but when he gets to Welcome to My Nightmare, the first Alice Cooper solo album, it's high fidelity, it's ear candy everywhere, and I totally consider that album the prototype album for Destroyer. It's almost like he makes that album, and in his head, he wants to make that album again, but with Kiss. And that's kind of what he does. So those two albums are sister albums for me. And so he goes in, and he's the boss. He's not going to assuage any egos kind of thing. He's going to crack the whip. He's going to make sure people play real good. And he's going to make sense out of these songs. He's going to have vision for things like Great Expectations and certainly Beth, which is the breakthrough song. So he is absolutely the fifth member of the band for that album. And what they do is they turn in a record that I think critics and whatnot look at it and go, well, we can't really call them a completely goofy little boy band anymore. I guess they're a little more ambitious and a little more fancy pants than we thought they were. They're still Kiss. We're still going to put them down, but it's like they kind of move into a little more of an adult zone with this album, and we loved it. And I think now, if you took a big poll, I mean, most Kiss fans, I mean, every Kiss fan is different, but statistically, I bet Destroyer comes out as the best Kiss album.
I think it's statistically the definitive Kiss album. And again, everyone's, subjective opinions are kind of, you always have that one guy who says it's the elder. But, being a Canadian, you had a number one hit was Shout It Out Loud. So they led off with Power Pop as their first single so they were trying to still do the same thing that they'd been doing previously with Come On and Love Me and all those singles. But with Bob Ezrin's refinement, they number one hit in Canada, number 31, I think it was in the US. That's a pretty good first single.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it power pop. I mean, to us, so I'll tell you a couple perspectives on this. So to us as kids, we called that an average good. So we had lousy goods, average goods, really goods. We had lousies and we had so-sos. And that's how the math worked out. So-sos cancel out, blah, blah, blah. So if we were calling that an average good, so it's not even a lousy good, that meant that we thought it was fairly heavy. And I think it does have a fairly heavy verse. And now, to put in perspective, in 1976, there just weren't that many heavy albums in the world. So Kiss was a heavy metal band in 1976. You put together your work and your babysitting and allowance and lawn mowing money, you could buy every heavy metal album eventually. There weren't. This isn't the new wave of British heavy metal and hair metal and thrash, and all of a sudden, oh my God, there's thousands of hard rock and heavy metal albums. So they were heavy for the time. But yeah, later on, as you look back on this, it just recedes in heaviness over time, and you could call all this stuff power pop. A funny thing I feel about Kiss's music as well is that there were very few bands that sounded like them, even though it was very, very conservatively put together music. I've said that about Morrissey. I've said that about the Morrissey catalog lately, and it's even more fascinating thinking about it with him. It's like, you get this massive 13 or 14 songs, and they're all guitar, bass, and drums, and the distortion pedals turned on for a lot of them, and they go from A to B, and they're all in 4/4 time, and all that, and yet you go, wow, nobody makes records like Morrissey, but nobody made records like Kiss, because Aerosmith was the hard rock version of the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin. Ted Nugent was a little riffier. Arguably, the Third Angel album sounds like Kiss. All the Stars albums sound like Kiss. Maybe Tease, maybe a little bit of Moxie, but even Moxie and Derringer, and they were different. And of course, all the British stuff was very different. You know, your I Heap Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin thing. You know, it didn't sound like that. So when I think back, the only things I can really think of that sounded like Kiss are like heavy Bachman Turnover Drive, uh, early Heavy Sweet, the Chin Chapman single type
Yeah.
stuff, and Heavy Slade. And that's really about it, because it's very chordal. It's not particularly riffy. It's chordal, and it's got this sort of percussive swelling percussion in waves vibe, where, like, you know how in UK glam they had sort of like hand claps mixed in with the snare drum and things like that, right? And just stomping music, 4/4, I mean 4 on the floor, you know, the bass drum hitting on all 4 beats and all that kind of thing. So it has a bit of that glam vibe, but I hate UK glam, number one. So I really only want to say Heavy Sweet and Heavy Slade and nothing else. Um, but it has a little bit of that Chin Chapman kind of production feel to it. So yeah, so Kiss moves through this whole time, and because of their almost like intentional simplicity, they don't sound like anybody else. Everybody else is kind of a little closer and doing other things and trying to be a little more high-minded with it, a little bit more note dense with their riffs than Kiss is. Kiss is just kind of like putting, you know, stacking power chords like pancakes through these albums. And it's not particularly, you know, it's certainly not, I get heck for this all the time from Kiss fans, but I think Aerosmith Rocks is like miles more interesting and more sophisticated than any Kiss album. I definitely like Rocks more than any Kiss album. So that's a funny thing about this band as well, that it's cool that nobody else sounds like them.
Right. And the next 2 singles, I'm curious about your ranking system for Flaming Youth at Detroit Rock City, just to set it up to where we're going to end up, no doubt.
Well, Julian, it's so funny that I remember these things. So I'll just do this for you, because it's probably not very hard. So here's how I would I would have got on the phone with my buddy Forrest Tube. Say I bought it downtown, came home, played it, and I had to phone him and tell him about it. Right? Here's what I would have said. Okay, Fiverr. We've got a really good, a really good, a really good, a lousy. Then we've got a so-so, a lousy good, an average good, a lousy, and an average good. So if you've got a so-so, let's see. So you've got 5, you've got 9 tracks. So it's an album out of 8 because there's one so-so. So this would have been a 6 out of 8. So this would have been a 6 out of 8 album. So to answer your question, I mean, Detroit Rock City is a masterpiece. It's probably statistically going to come out as the favorite Kiss song of all time, I would bet. And I thought I'm a King of the Nighttime World and God of Thunder. You know, God of Thunder is practically a Doom song, so that's cool. So it reminded us a little bit of Sabbath. But I forgot about Sweet Pain. So I think it's got 4 songs that could have come from, I would say, Kiss or Dress to Kill, and that would be Sweet Pain, Shout It Out Loud, Do You Love Me, and Flaming Youth.
Oh, hey, you're still here, watching or listening. Why don't you hit that subscribe button or click the like one? And if you want even more, click on the join button on YouTube. Thanks for your support. Interesting. And then everything changes. Middle of the year or late summer, Beth comes out. How does that... How did you rank that one? As someone who just said that all this heavy music and rocks this, and what did that do to you mentally?
Well, it was definitely a lousy and probably our most hated Kiss song for all of the 70s. You know, I still hate it. I find it, the melody is just so saccharine and maudlin. I mean, I like a good, sophisticated, well put together ballad, and I always cite, go listen to it if you don't know it, but Kim Mitchell, All We Are, off of the first full-length Kim Mitchell album. That is an absolute ballad. It's a power ballad. I mean, it's got drums and guitar and stuff in it, but it is just beautifully put together. So it's a hard rock ballad, but my point is you can make these good. Home Tonight by Aerosmith is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
You See Me Crying is a masterpiece. Beth is horrible. It's easy listening. It's maudlin. It's got strings. It's got stupid lyrics. I just hated everything about it. I don't hate Great Expectations anymore. I think it's kind of cool, kind of well put together and interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, what does it do for the band? I don't know what it does for the band because it doesn't turn them into particularly. It doesn't raise the amount of girls. I mean, it raises it somewhat, the amount of female audience that they have, but still, I think Kiss rolls through their entire career as a guys band, more so. So it's just one of these. It's just one of these novelty hits that bands tend to have every once in a while. It's just sitting there. It's just there for something for everybody to sort of be amused by.
Interesting. One of the things I really like about this book is how well it feels in the hand. It's like at 50, Kiss 50. It's a very comfortable book to hold. Has so many photographs in it. I'm absolutely flabbergasted just by the amount of visuals outside of all the ephemera that you've included. How much of a process is that, and how involved are you on the photographic side? Do you have a vision of, I want this image, can we get it?
No, what I love about working for Quarto is that it's the one publisher I work for where I don't have to worry about any of that. So Dennis, my editor over there, is a great music guy himself, and he prides himself on doing this great job throughout all these Quarto books. And there's dozens of these books, and they're always people sing the praises of all of them for layout. Right? It's beautiful layout in this. I like how they came up with the kind of the tour date thing, and then like I say, the ticker tape, the black area at the bottom, everything. It's just beautifully laid together, page to page to page. So Dennis also prides himself on making sure he's not putting in too much stuff there that people have seen already. So every single book I have out, people do say, "Oh, I've never seen that one, never seen that one, never seen that one." So in the old days, Dennis would also even write the captions, but now he's busy with a lot of other things. I love writing the captions, so I've taken over that role as well. So essentially, and the way it works, the mechanics of it is just such that he seems to have put in place for a lot of years now all the arrangements with all the photo agencies where he can just go shopping, and somehow it's worked into the budget and the numbers work out okay. But with a lot of my other publishers, I'm just begging people to give me pictures for free or for $100 or whatever, and trying to put it together and trying to smoke and mirrors to make it look like, oh yeah, if I put this here and I put this here, people won't complain that their pictures aren't great or whatever. I don't have enough. So that's the lovely part about this whole thing. It's my job is essentially come up with the text, turn it in, and then eventually I get a layout back that just blows my mind every time.
Do you ever have any points of friction with that when you start looking at the photos that have been selected? Do you live in the paranoid state that I have to, of that might be from Rock and Roll Over, but it's Destroyer, and in terms of having the right photos in the right place? Because Kiss fans are stickler for a lot of the specifics and details. Do you work with that sort of fear, or do you say this is a complete package, open it up, look at the book, look at the photos, read the text? You don't have to start at one page. You can just pretty much flip it open.
No, I mean, Dennis is smart enough that there won't be that many errors like that. I mean, this is obviously about 1 year, so there's a little bit of fluxing going on, but you're not going to see 1978 photos in by mistake and stuff like that, right? So no, generally speaking, he's smart enough with this whole photo curation thing to put everything in the right place. The odd time, the only friction comes, I wouldn't even say it's friction, but it's more like, we got 2 or 3 in a row that sort of look the same. And now I can't write a caption saying this is from this show, and this is also from this show, and this is also from this show. We go 4 or 5 pages with the same show. And so sometimes it's like, okay, what do I come up with for a caption that's going to be interesting here? And we switch gears or whatever. But generally speaking, he does a really good job with that. Sometimes I think he forgets that I've given him a bunch of pictures from a photographer, and then all of a sudden I totally forget that none of them were used. That kind of thing happens sometimes. It's like, oh man, I wish you would have thrown some in of that or whatever. But no, generally speaking, and I guess I do have contribution as well, because in everything I do for Quarto, I do turn over a big pile of stuff. Like most of these ads and memorabilia and things are from my own collection, or stuck in my computer somewhere or whatever. But yeah, I'm amazed what they come up with, and then to tell you more of the mechanics. So what happens is, when I am writing the captions, I have to meticulously, I have to go, there's a link that takes me to the photo agency, and I read what caption they have. And the photo agencies are terrible with that stuff.
Yeah.
I have to recreate all sorts of things and go check the tour archive and compare, and then can sometimes make judgment calls on what's going on. So my captions are, generally speaking, a lot more than is at the photo agency. I've even tried to tell the photo agencies the odd time. It's like, can I trade you? Like, can you send me some photos for free if I like give you a whole bunch of way greatly improved captions from over 40, or not 40, but say if I'm limited to Quarto, a dozen books that I've done, where I've made the captions way better than what you have, and it's like, nobody there gives a damn, right? They just don't seem to care. So
Yeah, people got to license the photos regardless, and it's really on the buyer or the licensee to figure out whether it's the
yeah,
right
but
use.
but if I had pride of ownership in one of these photo agencies, I would say, yeah, I would love it if our captions were, we had a reputation for having really good captions.
Yeah, I went through that with the Aerosmith book. Wrong tours, wrong details, wrong everything. Trying to get corrected is such a time sink. It's almost an impossible task. To be cognizant of the time, I want to talk about Rock and Roll Over.
Okay.
It's a real yin and yang for Kiss, that you start out with an artistic, expressive album, and then you revert to Neanderthal form in some respects. Almost like the fear took over of, what have we done? We can't go back to Bob and do that again. No more Beths. What was your appraisal of Rock and Roll Over? Because it's a real contrast to the year.
I love how you frame that. Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, they get Eddie Kramer in to produce, who quote unquote produced Alive. And they do kind of like, um I don't know what you would call it. I suppose there's less ear candy, there's less fidelity, there's less, the drums don't sound as good. Although people love kind of the drum sound of this. It's more of a abstract, view of it. But people love the snare drum sound, for example. Kind of interesting snare sound. But what is snare sound? It's such an abstraction, right? Or the bass drum sound. But it's a very mid rangey production. There's not a lot of low end. There's not, the cymbals don't sound particularly great. And there's less ear candy. And you're right, they do kind of revert to form. Uh, I don't exactly know why. I don't really feel like, the composite of the reviews of Destroyer were particularly bad versus anything earlier. But it does sound. I mean, it does sound. I would say it sounds most like the Kiss album. It doesn't really sound like Hotter Than Hell, and doesn't particularly sound like Dress to Kill. I'd say the writing sounds a lot like Dress to Kill, and the production sounds more like Kiss. Um, but yeah, so they make this record, and like you say, it seems like, the demographic, the age group of their demographic almost goes down 18 months or 24 months, kind of thing. It's like we're back to trying to appeal to 11, 12, and 13-year-olds, whereas Destroyer might have been for later teens or whatever. So, but it works. They get another hit with Hard Luck Woman, and there are some songs there that live on, and it goes platinum. So it's not like it's a complete bomb. It's heavy enough. But as us as kids, by this point we've heard Sad Wings of Destiny, and there's just no looking back. It's just
There's there's
absolute.
there's, there's nowhere to go from that album.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I've always said this about that record. That is the first record since the beginning of metal in 1970, with, say, In Rock or Very Heavy, Very Humble or Black Sabbath or Paranoid, that that actually greatly improved heavy metal, like kicked it up a whole notch, sort of thing. I mean, we have had two of my favorite albums of all time in Sabotage and Physical Graffiti in '75, but I remember getting Sad Wings of Destiny as a new release, and we're just going, what the heck? I mean, we've never heard this kind of singing before. We've never heard these kind of riffs before, these kinds of lyrics. The production is amazing. It's dark. It's serious. Like, this is scholarly metal, right? And so you listen to that and you compare it to Led Zeppelin Presence or Kiss Rock and Roll Over, and it's like, forget it. You know, there's a new thing going on here.
Do you think that Rock and Roll Over is more authentic, and that's perhaps a little bit what the problem is with Destroyer, and bringing Bob Ezrin in to do something that wasn't inherently natural to the band by reverting back to the four on the floor, record basically Uber Garage style in a theater? That is what makes the band, that is Kiss. It's more true to themselves, more authentic.
Wow, that's a deep point. I've never really thought about it, but I suppose you have to say, what is authentic Kiss? I mean, they really are an album. I mean, there are 3 studio albums and a double live album to give you that foundation, but it's in such a compressed time frame, and those albums are significantly different from each other. So is it more authentic? I suppose. I mean, then you would be saying that those songs on Destroyer are not who we are, but this is still a young band. I don't know if had they made a second album like that, we'd all be saying, I guess that's who you are. That is who you want to be, kind of thing. But, and as kids, we wouldn't have had the sort of subtle, sophisticated thinking to think, well, this is really Bob Ezrin's album. We wouldn't have really thought that as kids. We would just thought it's kind of a little more fancy pants of a Kiss album. I suppose as kids, we were hopeful that they were moving in a Kings of the Nighttime world, right? Is that I'm having a brain freeze. But God of Thunder, Detroit Rock City, Do You Love Me? Even Shout It Out Loud, is a little more sophisticated. So we were hoping they were maybe moving in that direction, and then we'd get a whole pile more of that. We definitely didn't want any more Great Expectations or Beth. But Rock and Roll Over was fine. But I just remember getting that record and thinking even the album cover, it certainly didn't live up to the Destroyer album cover. It's really cool now looking back. But as kids, we thought, yeah, you're right. As kids, we thought this music is, we're growing as teenagers. We're advancing in our years and months, and Kiss seemed to be moving backwards. And maybe slightly, we're gonna replace them with Rainbow Rising and Sad Wings of Destiny.
Yeah, almost like there was a aversion to going the same path that Alice took in terms of his development once Bob really started working on and moving his art in a completely different area.
That's really interesting because what happens with Alice is he makes lighter albums past Welcome to My Nightmare, right? He gets even lighter and more mainstream and still pretty complicated in productions, like very varied. So imagine if Kiss would have gone that way, right? Maybe after Destroyer, we would have got a Lace and Whiskey or From the Inside or Goes to Hell or something, right?
Yeah, which would have been very complex and difficult with 4 primary characters, with other man versus 1 star character as such.
Yeah.
So last question is really differentiate December the 31st, 1975 with the same 1 year later. How is the band changed at the end of 1976 in your view? And what has the year done for Kiss?
Wow. So I guess the 1975 is like, we're all excited. This is fresh and new. Oh my God, we're going to be rock stars. So that's kind of cool. And then at the end of it, they're probably absolutely exhausted, and they're probably saying we are rock stars, and where do we go from here, kind of thing. We've had such a monumentally busy year. and probably the exhaustion is leading to probably more drugs and alcohol at that point, probably more fighting, more deciding we don't like this guy. So yeah, at the end of it, they probably felt like they lived 10 years in that 1 year.
Yeah, I've often seen a parallel track between Rocks and Draw the Line for Aerosmith and Kiss in
Yeah,
1976 versus 1977 in
great
terms of
point.
the interpersonal challenges and the challenges and perceptions of relationship with management and what management wanted to accomplish with that art and that talent.
Great.
So,
Yeah.
very parallel. Um, where can people find the book? And are you doing signed copies that are available separately? And what are you working on next or now?
Yeah, so a big part of my income every year is being a mail order guy of my own books. So although with the tariff thing I've pared down my list, but at martinpopoff.com I have about 35 of my 135 titles for sale. Um and I do sign them and send them out. There's PayPal buttons there for Canada or the States. I'm not doing these overseas because postage costs. It's a long story, but it's different for every country using the mailing service I have. But yes, anything from my site, I sign and send out from the office here. Although I'm doing kind of up above my head here these big, huge, fat, monumental 3 books that I did for Schiffer last year. The Deep Purple at 640 pages, the Maiden at 666 pages, and the Dio at over 400 pages, full color throughout, hundreds of pictures, lots of text. Those ones, I sign a book plate and mail that out separately, and you can put that in the book. But they send out directly from the publisher. So yeah, martinpopoff.com for the books. As for what I'm working on, it's interesting. I don't like to say unless somebody has one of the publishers has put it at their website, meaning they kind of get first point of like announcing anything, and then
Yep.
I usually hear about it on Facebook. But I do have 9 finished books that have been long finished and turned into 3 different publishers, and those are all coming out over the next year into probably mid 2027. So I have a bunch of stuff finished, but I have not had a book deal for over a month now, like a book to work on. So I am completely bored, and I've been taking that time to start putting my whole. Here's a stack of my ST here. I've been putting my collection into Discogs for the first time. So that's taking hours and hours, and I'm even selling little bits of it and doing orders, and then of course I have to pack them up and mail them. So I've kept myself busy, but I'm not working on anything right now. I'm just waiting for 9 books to come out.
Well, you do know that next year is the 50th anniversary of Kiss 77, right? You got time to get to work on that.
Let me tell you a story, Julie. So here's what happened. So this is what happened. You got a minute? I mean, this won't take long, but I thought, Dennis, I think we got to do Kiss 77, right? Because this is doing well. People like it. Even Kiss fans like it, which is hard to have happen, right? We know we're big complainers about a lot of things, but I kind of simultaneously with Dennis talked ourselves out of it, because with Dennis, it's like I don't want to start sourcing Kiss pictures all over again and do this. I've had enough Kiss for a while, and I'm thinking, maybe I have too. But as I see this and talk about it, and it's like, and I think about 77, I think, boy, we could use the exact same layout, and I could write the exact same sections, and we could do this for 77, because 77, you do get a studio album, you get a double live album, which is 3 sides live, and so you get a whole half of a new studio album as well. So lots goes on, but I have a feeling we're probably not going to end up doing Kiss 77.
Well, I like to think of Kiss fans as not being critical and nitpicky, but as passionate. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that I think's come through in this conversation with you, that you're passionate about what you do. And with 135 plus 9 under the hood, I hope that you keep on going and keep finding topics that interest you to dive into, because rock and roll books are just fantastic reads to relive our youth and
Yeah.
to
Well,
perhaps
we
learn
we
something
we
new and
hope
see something.
we hope you keep going, because you've just elevated the level of Kiss scholarship to an unbelievable level. So it's great.
I appreciate that. Martin, thanks a lot for taking the time to join us today, and the best of luck with this book and your future projects.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the message board and discuss the topics we've broadcast today. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you've listened to this show, and a like would very much be appreciated. We hope you'll join us again, but until then, remember, life's a radio. Turn it up to 10.